This is going to be the last video of this series on human anatomy. And I like to do embryology at the very end because embryology, or human development, I should say, it's not strictly embryology. We'll talk a little bit about the fetal stage of development, the embryonic stage, and embryogenesis, which is part of the germinal stage. But I like to do it towards the end or at the end because we now have a full understanding of all the different organ systems and body components. And now that we have those, we can interlay those within structures that occur very, very, very early in development and parlay that into this sweet little baby that's going to be born and grow throughout the years. So let's take a look at this. To be clear, we're going to talk about 3 different stages. We're really going to focus primarily on the first stage, which is the pre-embryonic stage, otherwise known as the germinal stage. The germinal stage is going to involve a process known as cleavage, implantation, and embryogenesis. And to be clear, embryogenesis is distinct from what we see at number 2 here, which is the embryonic stage. The pre-embryonic stage is going to take about 16 days. And when I say 16 days, that is commencing at fertilization of an egg, fertilization of an ovulated egg in the uterine tube. The embryonic stage is going to go from roughly day 16 to the end of week 8. And that's going to be the development of the different organ systems in the body, though not fully functional organ systems. And then from week 9 to week 38 is going to represent the fetal stage. And that's where those organ systems become fully developed and capable of doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, one thing I want to point out is I just outlined those different stages. These are not to be confused with the terms first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester, which is often used by clinicians to talk about pregnancies with the family of the individuals who are having a child. So we are not talking about trimesters. We're talking about different stages of development. Now, how does someone know when they became pregnant or when they are due? Well, what a clinician is probably going to do is determine the day the last menses started. So we know from this image on the left, which we looked at previously, this is a cycle of the uterine changes or the uterine cycle. And menses takes roughly 5 days. And then the proliferative phase is day 6 to day 14, or roughly day 14 or day 15. So that is to say, from the beginning of menses to all the way down here takes 14 or 15 days. At this point is when ovulation occurs. And to be clear, ovulation occurs in the ovaries as a result or culmination of the ovarian cycle. So the uterine cycle and ovarian cycle are distinct cycles, but very, very much related to each other. To be clear, at day 14 is when fertilization would occur. It may not happen exactly after ovulation, but let's just assume it does. If fertilization occurs, we will proceed through the pre-embryonic stage, which encompasses this whole roughly 2-week period. If fertilization did occur, we will then proceed into the embryonic stage. If fertilization did not occur, then over those 2 weeks would be the development of the uterus known as the secretory phase, and then eventually menses would happen again. Okay, so if we look at the uterus right here, we see this ovulated egg from an ovary. That ovulated egg is going to be swept into the oviduct, the uterine tube, or known as the fallopian tube. And if fertilization is going to occur, it's going to happen probably in the lateral third of the fallopian tube. So the sperm cell is going to proceed up the vagina, into the uterus, into the oviduct, travel through a great portion of the oviduct before it encounters that ovulated egg and fertilize the egg. Once that egg is fertilized, the process known as cleavage is going to happen. And cleavage is cell division of the fertilized egg and then the subsequent cells. So what we see right here, this is the first step in cleavage, where we have 2 cells known as blastomeres. Blastomeres are the cells that are developing within the conceptus. And the conceptus is the general term used for this fertilized egg that goes through different stages as it proceeds to implant on the endometrium, on the innermost lining of the uterus. So those blastomeres, through the process of cleavage, are going to divide again. So we go from 2 blastomeres to 4 blastomeres that we see right here. 4 blastomeres are going to turn into 8 blastomeres. Once we have roughly 16 blastomeres, we refer to the structure as a morula. That morula is going to continue to divide. After 72 hours or 3 days, the morula has finally made its way into the uterine cavity. It's not yet implanted on the endometrium, and that doesn't occur until roughly day 5. So this right here is what's known as a blastocyst. It's one of the developmental stages from the morula as it implants on the uterine wall on the endometrium. So let's take a closer look at that blastocyst. Okay, here we are with the blastocyst. It's composed of an inner cell mass. This is what's going to give rise to the embryo and then the fetus. Prior to all that, it's going to give rise to the 3 germ layers that we'll outline in a moment here. This right here is the blastocele, otherwise known as the blastocyst cavity. And then right here is the trophoblast, and the trophoblast is going to give rise to the placenta. And the placenta is the structure that's going to provide nourishment to the developing embryo and fetus over the next roughly 36 weeks. Because keep in mind, we are just about at 2 weeks here. So one thing I want to highlight, which I think I did not highlight, is it takes roughly 7 days for implantation to begin. That is to say, for this blastocyst to start implanting on the endometrium of the uterus, but another 7 days for it fully to implant, which is going to be roughly 14 to 16 days. While it's being fully implanted in the endometrium, this inner cell mass is going to differentiate into the 3 germ layers. These are layers that are going to give rise to the different organ systems and tissues of the body. And those layers are the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. And that's what we see in this image right here. The bottom is the endoderm, the middle layer in yellow is the mesoderm, and the outermost layer in purple is the ectoderm. Keep in mind, this is embryogenesis. We are still in the pre-embryonic stage, but formation of these germ layers is known as embryogenesis. Once those 3 germ layers have formed, we then move into the embryonic stage, which is day 16 to the end of week 8. And during this time, those germ layers are going to develop into all the organ systems we've talked about in the human body. Now, to be clear, the individual organs and the collective organ systems are not going to be fully functional yet, but all the organ systems are going to be there. And then we would move into the fetal stage, which is about week 9. And that's when those organ systems fully develop and become fully functional. The heart is pumping blood, skeletal muscles are capable of twitching, the bones calcify, and we get a fully functioning little organism. So that's just a very, very brief synopsis on human development, the first 38 weeks of life.